Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Fireside Chat, the future of user-focused observability with Embrace and SpeedCurve. Before we get started and we do intros and meet everyone, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. So, first of all, the Fireside Chat is being recorded and it will be made available to you and your team later in case you'd like to watch it later or share with other people. And also, please ask your questions in the chat box during our discussion. So I will be reviewing all the questions submitted, and if it's appropriate at the time, I can ask it to the panelists at that time. If not, we will have dedicated time at the end to answer questions. So as we're discussing, if anything comes to mind, just send it in the Q&A, and we will review it. And with all of that said, why don't we meet everyone, myself included, who will be a part of this discussion? So, hello everyone. My name is Colin Contrary. I am the head of content at Embrace. I will be the moderator for this awesome discussion. And we've got what? Three other awesome people on this panel, which I'm so excited to have a fun discussion about user-focused observability with. So, let's kick off with some intros. Andrew, how about you go first?
Sure. Andrew Tennell, I lead most of the organization here at Embrace. Been here for 3.5 years. It's been an adventurous 3.5 years. I'm personally quite disappointed today we did not do it holiday sweater themed because my wife loves holiday sweaters, so therefore I love holiday sweaters. But Mark, who's in New Zealand, apparently doesn't wear sweaters for the holidays, which actually makes sense given its tropical climate this time of year, which I'm pretty jealous about because it is 43 degrees Fahrenheit and dumping rain here in Portland, Oregon, which is where I live.
Wait,
But
Andrew. Wait, so Mark, do y'all wear like holiday shorts? Is there like a summery holiday thing, or y'all just like
Pajamas?
eschew holiday attire?
Totally, it's upside down for us. We wear shorts, we wear Hawaiian shirts and flip-flops or jandals, and we go to the beach and have a barbecue. So I've only ever had a white Christmas once, and it was amazing. Snow, rain, grim. It totally made sense.
Ah, all right.
I don't know. Right about now, a Hawaiian shirt with Santa Claus and a pair of shorts sounds pretty brilliant. Prior to Embrace, I was at New Relic for 4.5 years. So I led a large swath of their product organization. And then before that, I was at Amazon Web Services. So I've been in observability, reliability, cloud computing for about 12 years.
Nice. Awesome. Mark, how about you go next?
Sure. So I'm Mark. I am previously the founder of SpeedCurve. I guess still am, since we're running both things next to each other. And my background is a bit more in design. So I came to performance through the lens of design and working at agencies and having to stand up in front of boards and talk about user experience and whether it was fast or slow and what impact that was having on the business. And so that took me to the world of performance, where we've been running SpeedCurve for 13 years. And as you'll probably know, we just kind of sold to Embrace. So really excited to talk about that today.
Nice. Thanks, Mark. And Cliff, how about you round us out?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited. Calling in from Denver, Colorado. I know there's a lot of Broncos fans out there. I got some chats before this that asked if I was going to talk about the Broncos, but I'm not going to talk about the Broncos.
I'm also a Broncos fan, Cliff.
Bo
I'm
Nix, right? He's
pretty
a duck.
excited. Yeah, big Bo Knicks fan.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be some comments on that one here pretty soon. Anyway, I've been at SpeedCurve as Chief Product Officer. I've known Mark for years since he started SpeedCurve. But my journey with performance actually began about 20 years ago, if you can believe that. 2006, starting with Keynote Systems, where I was doing load and performance testing. And I caught the performance bug, and I've had it ever since. Have moved around to doing this a little bit on the other side, where I was running performance and reliability teams at Walmart Labs. And then over back into the startup world at Sosta, building Impulse, which was one of the sort of first sort of modern RUM performance products that were out there. After that, I went over to Akamai. We actually acquired Impulse and Sosta. From Akamai, I joined Steve and Mark and Tammy and Joseph at the time at SpeedCurve and have been with them ever since. And now I'm a proud VP of product here at Embrace. So really excited about this journey. There's a lot of history when we talk about web performance, and there's a lot of moving parts. And it's really interesting. And what I found just super interesting as we start to kind of bring these companies together is just how complementary this pitch was to back in the day when we were talking about faster and stronger and all the different DevOps versus web performance at Velocity in those days. So it really feels like home, and it really feels special because I think we're embarking on an entirely new journey now. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cliff. And now I didn't think football in general, more specifically Denver football, would be brought up, but we also already have a question from someone I assume you know, Cliff, saying, Cliff, please tell us why you actually prefer the Seahawks.
Oh,
Story
okay.
there?
Boy, Dan Campbell, man, I feel like.
All right. Let's move on a little bit. Let's cover what we're going to be discussing today. So we're going to start. Our three panelists here have teased this a little bit, but we'll obviously cover why we're here today. Spoiler alert: Embrace acquired SpeedCurve, and we are now working together. We're also going to cover. We realize a lot of people showing up here might only know one of our two platforms. So we'll give you a high-level overview of what the Embrace platform is, and also what the SpeedCurve platform is, just to orient yourself to what our two distinct products are as they currently stand. We'll also have a section where we're going to talk about where we see the current state of observability, RUM, and performance monitoring is, and where we see the future in terms of where we're going to invest in the future of our products. And then actually that tees up the fourth point. We'll share a little bit about the product vision of our two different platforms as we start to unify and draw insights into each of them from our other expertise. And so with all of that said, we're just going to start with, let's talk about why we're here today. And Cliff, you pooched my slide, but
Oh, sorry, buddy.
Embrace acquired SpeedCurve. And so with that, let us begin the discussion. Andrew, why are we here today?
Yeah. Well, yeah, so obviously we made an acquisition. Folks who are on this may or may not be familiar with us as a company, and we'll talk a little bit about our product portfolio in a little bit. But acquisitions can happen for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's a private equity firm that's taking a company that is revenue rich but has a lot of headcount and thinking about like cost savings and how they can eke out profitability. We're certainly not a private equity firm. That wasn't the hypothesis here. Sometimes it's a legacy company that is looking to enter new spaces where they're adding a business line or they're trying to drive innovation. We're a startup. I mean, we're a Series B startup. We've been innovating in the mobile space for a number of years. We launched a product line in web earlier this year. We're the principal drivers around the OpenTelemetry project in client-side telemetry, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in the future. But what really attracted us to the SpeedCurve team was the fact that it was very small. It was a team of 7 folks who were all deeply experienced in web performance. Cliff talked a little bit about his experience. Mark is the founder and CEO of SpeedCurve, but like sneakily built a lot of the platform himself. Like, he wrote a lot of code, still writes code. Um, and was very sales and marketing light. So like this happened because when we were thinking about investing in the web space, the principal tenet which we kind of operate our business is we differentiate from the rest of the observability space. I'll call it like big observability, and that we're not just a data visualization platform. We don't endeavor to just ingest data and then regurgitate signals into kind of generic UIs where we leave discovery up to the user. We're very much a solutions product that endeavors to provide pre-built insights and guide rails and help facilitate discovery amongst our users. And that requires specialization. And so if you think about like us investing in the web space, we had a bunch of folks who were really, really, really smart in OpenTelemetry. They understood kind of what the community was doing there and that is it workspace. We had JavaScript experts, but we didn't really have anyone who was a deep web performance expert who had been working with the teams at Safari. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later about like what's happening in the RUM space, with regard to the evolution even in that. And You think about the value of users using iOS devices in Safari is quite big, but it's lagged behind in terms of exposure of kind of performance metrics. Um, we didn't have anyone who had that depth of expertise. And so in order for us to build a product that met my standards around the level of depth and expertise and kind of pre-built insights to our customers, we needed to add talent. So I started like looking for companies, and there were a number of smaller companies that kind of fit the bill for us. But one stood out, and SpeedCurve stood out on two dimensions. One, I had personal connection to their team. So Cliff worked really closely with a good friend of mine who worked for me at New Relic. Um, and I kind of texted her and was like, "Hey, who's this guy?" And she's like, he's okay." Actually, I no, he's had glowing reviews, right? Glowing reviews. And I was like, they have a crazy good customer logo book. Like, why haven't I like heard of them much before in the venture community? And it was because it was a bootstrap company that Mark founded and built, and kind of deliberately didn't take venture funding, and they didn't have sales and marketing. And so I pinged Cliff and we started talking. I flew out to Colorado. We had a couple beers, right along the foothills. It was pretty gorgeous day. It was adjacent to our SKO earlier in the year, so it was actually really convenient. And it was like, hey, this actually might work. And then we just started meeting folks. And from there, these things can take a while, but it turned out to be a really natural fit between the two companies. I think we have, and you'll those who are attending will discover like we had a very much a shared hypothesis in how we see the world and the need for technology to help our end users really experience the technology we build for them every day in a delightful way, and performance is front and center to that. And so yeah, it worked out really favorably for both companies, and it's exciting to see what's next.
Now let's hear Mark and Cliff's side of that story, Andrew.
Yeah, where to start? Yeah, so SpeedCurve has been on quite a journey over the last 13 years, and I deliberately wanted a company that was small and sustainable and kind of very sort of authentic to its roots. And so, for better or worse, I chose not to go down the VC route. And we really benefited from a community that was wanting to invest in performance and understand performance. And I guess the thing that I bring to the world of performance is my design thinking and design approach. And that was really evident even, 13 years ago. There are lots of great tools. A lot of them are built by engineers. A lot of them are built to just put data on a single glass of pane of glass kind of vibe, and just, here's the data, you figure it out. And I like to think about SpeedCurve as more of a communications tool. How do we get people into the world of performance and get them to understand things, and use it as a tool to bring in a wider audience in the organization. And so for me, SpeedCurve has always been this relationship between communications and the data and visualization. And I love all of that, designing stuff, writing code, putting all of that together. And so we really benefited from a community that was looking for that, looking for tools that would help them communicate. And off the back of the Velocity conference, things like that, we grew and we found an audience that was very welcoming, that loved our kind of tools and the approach we were taking, and that just sort of grew in spite of what we did. And so that's why we ended up in I guess, a slightly odd shape, in that we were very, very product focused and we had no real sales and marketing team. I forced poor old Cliff to kind of, take sales calls here and there, and he's like, "What? This is not what I signed up for." But it grew. And so, we're at a point now where there's a lot we still want to achieve, and we're fairly resource constrained. So that's where it just made a lot of sense to, join with Embrace and figure out how we bring a lot of our vision alive in the observability space. Like, I think it's fair to say that both of our tools are fairly specialist. Embrace is a very specialist, kind of narrow in the world of mobile native app and doing that incredibly well. We're quite deep and specialist in the world of kind of web, both synthetic and rum. And so by putting those two really strong verticals together, we create quite a broad offering, and we think we can bring this idea of user-focused observability to the market. And, when I think about observability, it's fairly broad. It's a generic bucket where you send a lot of information in. And so bringing in the idea of a user, bringing in the idea of someone that has a task and a set of goals that they're trying to achieve, how do we use that as a mental model to then get on and visualize stuff? So really excited about, what this means for the vision that I guess, Cliff's been working on for 20 years.
Yeah, I think that thinking about like the past, thinking about speed curve, and actually, would you mind just throwing that picture up? Because one of my favorite pictures in the world was actually on this slide. Sorry, Con, if you go back one, or sorry, I guess it's down. It's the speed curve overview slide that Mark was just speaking to.
Oh, hang on. I can't
Sorry,
pooch.
there's a
I can't
picture of
pooch.
a
You're
brilliant
skipping
group of
ahead,
people
Cliff.
sitting at a
Yeah, you're
table.
skipping ahead. I can't pooch the whole slide
Oh,
deck, Cliff.
sorry. I apologize. We'll get to it then. We'll get to it. Yeah, going back, user-focused observability, meeting with Andrew, working with Mark on this and in this space for years. This just really makes sense. I think that, to Mark's point, we've been small and mighty, wearing a lot of hats. It's a lot of fun when everybody in the group thinks that they're a product manager when you're the product manager. But it's a ball, it's a blast. But there's certain things that I think you do need to get your message out, and you do need to get out to a wider audience. And Embrace has a lot of that machine that we're plugging into, and just thrilled to kind of be partnering with and working through. So yeah, all made a whole lot of sense to me, even before Andrew came out and let me buy him beers. So
Awesome. Now, I didn't hear as part of that meeting in Denver, y'all seeing a football game, so something's amiss given the shared love of it. But anyway,
Wrong time of year.
oh, wrong time of year. Okay, you got it. All right. Let's move on. Let's learn. So we've covered a little bit of this, and Mark, you covered a little bit about the specialization of our two tools. It'd be great to share with all the attendees here a brief overview of what is the Embrace platform, what is the SpeedCurve platform, just to give people a little more context into our two different tools. So let's start with Embrace, and I'll hand it over to Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't include this slide, which I think was, is representative of kind of like the dev tools and observability landscape. But we started the company, the Embrace, in the mobile space, similarly to what SpeedCurve did, in that we were a specialist tool for a slice of the problem set that a practitioner working in their space would care about. When Embrace was founded in 2016, 2017, Crashlytics was basically the de facto kind of standalone standard. It had gotten acquired by Twitter and then acquired by Google. There were a few kind of like special solutions in that space, and similarly in web, you had like the emergence of error tracking with Sentry and Rollbar and others. Um, but like largely those were bought standalone by engineering teams, while the reliability teams, SREs, etc., would buy a New Relic or a Datadog, and you would go into like their run product and they'd show the geo map with like network latency from uptime, and that was supposed to be like your notion of reliability for the site, like not whether or not the page actually loaded. I'm like, it's up. The server responds in 200 milliseconds. Great success. Well, what if like the main hero banner, on a website actually like doesn't have the right caching configurations and it's just like painfully slow to load, or on a mobile app there's a whole series of exceptions that result in a broken user experience. Nobody's really thinking about that. And we saw really good success in that space. We went through Y Combinator in 2019. And then of course the pandemic hit and there was this explosion in digital properties and we benefited quite a bit. The Fast forward a couple of years, and as we kind of evolved as a company, we really started investing in OpenTelemetry. And I think if you go to the next slide, um, the kind of like our core product thesis, which was, hey, this notion of being able to gain visibility into every session and individual users, explore deep insights, get context-rich data, not just charts. So we want to uncover insights, not just data for you. That could be us helping you explain a flame graph if you're going through a really detailed performance profile. It could be us breaking down stack traces into ways that get you quicker to answers in the line of code that is relevant to you. It could be us tagging third-party network requests with, the team that individually owns them based on something that's very framework specific. And we kind of expanded that to then think about the world and like, how do we actually do this where we're building not proprietary instrumentation, but the future of instrumentation that will be the building block of, every customer from a standards point of view, and that will eventually get ubiquitously adopted. Um, you can click to the next slide there. And so like, I think that shift for us was really one of being less of a standalone product bought by an individual team in a large enterprise, and one where our journey was to try to be a product that was principally relied upon as the source of whether or not your users could succeed in using your mobile app. And earlier this year, like late spring, early summer, we decided to expand into web. And so, like that same kind of product thesis for us, which was, really thinking about how we go build best-in-class open source instrumentation. We raise the quality bar at the community level to where, it's not just the services instrumentation on a Java service in OpenTelemetry it works, but there's specialist building instrumentation that will really work in an Android app based on Kotlin, in an iOS app based on Swift, prepackaged distributions for React Native or Flutter or Unity. And now a browser package where, it's actually slimmed down, size is considered. We're using, common semantics that are agreed upon as performance kind of data that's captured from the browser. We're thinking about hooking into the RUM standards that exist in the browser, and we'll talk about that a little bit. That's been our investment area while still allowing you to buy our product and use it alongside whatever backend observability provider you choose. And so, I think our thesis here is we don't think you should have to choose all in one at the expense of a product your front end engineers will actually use to make performance improvements for their users, or choose a standalone tool that's not integrated with the rest of your reliability story. Because the fact is, like, people are always going to ask, did this impact our users? And we want to be able to answer that story. And we want to be able to answer it when you see an incident happening in the data center. But likewise, we want a front-end engineer or a mobile engineer to be able to discover an issue that's impacting their users and say, what's the root cause of this? And maybe the root cause is client-side code, but maybe the root cause is also integration with how an SDK written inside that mobile app handles a network request. I'm not talking about the latency or error rate to that. It's not observable from the back end, but it is coupled. It is a concern about that, right? And it's a very specialized domain that needs to take in account the framework, the libraries you're using, the SDKs you're using, how the browser processed it, how the chipset processed it. And that's, it's true, I think, in all of these runtimes. So, we've been building toward being that, can we help engineers measure, does my product work and perform for my end users across any screen?
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. And now let's hear a little bit about SpeedCurve.
Hmm. I'll start with a story, and that's probably one of my favorite web performance moments that actually happened before I started SpeedCurve and was partly the genesis for SpeedCurve. And to me, this sort of speaks to the power of visualization, and that is that I was working on a large tourism website, and they had a huge amount of third parties. And those third parties were totally bogging down the website, but no one was motivated or compelled enough to actually sort it out because there were agencies globally just dumping in marketing tags. And I built a simple visualization using film strips. So, as you know, in synthetic testing, we can record video of exactly how the page loads, millisecond by millisecond. And I created a simple two film strips, one with all the third parties turned off and one with them turned on. And there was literally a 2 second delay of these extra white frames in the film strip. And when I presented that to the CEO of this large tourism provider, they just went, "What are those? What's that 2 seconds doing in there? Why is there a big white gap?" And that led to a conversation about third parties and them being mismanaged. And they were like, "Just turn them off, make them squeal." And so that's all we did. We turned it off. Everybody kind of, was up in arms. Everybody reaudited their third parties and put them back in. And the thing I like about that is that it sort of speaks to the core of what SpeedCurve has always been about, which is about that storytelling and the ability to take data and lots of data and lots of signals and try and condense and structure it and layer it in a fashion where you can tell a story that's that simple with some visuals that motivates the CEO, that motivates management, but also behind that, there's all the deep diagnostic data that the technical team can go in and intimately understand, waterfalls and JavaScript performance. And so there's always been, I guess, the vision of SpeedCurve is to be able to move up and down those layers and take people on that journey from what is the simple story that compels and motivates an audience, and then how does that kind of move down into the diagnostic data. And I guess that's what people responded to when they first saw SpeedCurve in a world of engineering tools. We appear quite simple on the surface, where you can tell that story, but then there's also that richness when you can dive right down under the hood and get right down to, what is my low-af JavaScript issues on a single page view on someone, on a mobile device on the edge of the network somewhere. And so to be able to move through those different stacks. And then if you jump to the next slide, Colin, kind of, a lot of what we've been about over the last 13 years is community and kind of expertise has been a big part of our brand. And we've spoken at a lot of conferences. Three or four of us at SpeedCurve have written books on performance. And we really like being involved in the community. For us, I guess that's our form of engagement and marketing. And I guess to me, it speaks to a deep love of the web that I think a lot of us share. I graduated from design school as Netscape was being released, designed my first pages back in the 90s, have done a mixture of code and design for the last 30 years. And I think it's that love of what the web has done for us, both good, both bad. It's turned out to be a bit more of a mixed bag than I think we expected kind of back there. But that ability to like shape information and kind of share it and, improve it for people, I think is part of what drives us. So we love to speak at conferences, not necessarily about our products, but about the web, about performance, how we make things better for everybody and make the platform better. And I guess, one of our proud achievements there is that, Steve and I were sitting in Hawaii one day and we cooked up the idea of uh, what we called Last Painted Hero, which is, my concern about the visual rendering experience, his concern about the engineering. How do we bring that in together in a metric that, really joins that story? And so by analyzing the video and understanding when something renders, we develop this metric. And it's a little known story that then went on to inspire the Chrome team to create largest contentful paint, because they were looking for something that they could automatically choose the largest element and instrument that in a way that affected search rankings. So, we're a small team, but I think we've had an outsized impact over the last 13 years. So really proud of those sorts of moments.
Cliff even he even shared the proof, which is a video of the Chrome Web Performance team after your blog post about Last Painted Hero, actually talking about it at the Velocity conference. There's a bit of revisionist history out there around the origin of it. I guess a company as large as Google is not going to give little SpeedCurve the origin story of it. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool to think about how you guys have historically thought about the human impact on how you can measure that, which is, as we kind of talked about at the jump, very much consistent with our larger hypothesis around, human impact of your site not working, of your app not working is a reliability problem. It's just not traditionally been thought of as that way. Which actually a great segue, because I think we're going to talk about the future of Rum. And like, I think one of the trends we've been seeing broadly is a really strong interest from reliability, platform engineering, site reliability engineering teams on measuring reliability through the lens of users. I think they're being asked now that, data center uptime is solved, like, what are the things we don't know? Like, how's our software actually impacting end user performance? Are our users happy? Like, are they able to load the site consistently and do the things we designed for them? Is it fast enough, right? Like, is it, that upsell widget rendering in a time for most of our users quickly enough that they see it during the checkout process and don't skip over it? When we're processing information and they're going to get an intermediate step, is it taking so long to happen and show them a result that and with no visual feedback that they abandon the checkout flow? And so we're actually seeing, decreases in that process. Um, I'd love to, Mark and Cliff, kind of get your read on like how have you seen the evolution of Rum from, where you started in the historic Rum stuff now to where you're thinking about what we've been doing in the open telemetry space and kind of what the feedback you were hearing from your customers historically from the reliability side and where you wanted to go and what you're thinking about as we think about our investment opportunities.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head on a lot of this. And I kind of started off talking a little bit about that whole faster and stronger philosophy back in the day, DevOps, web perf folks that were two adjacent camps, but not quite the same camp. I think that what we're shifting to is absolutely that, like you said, those reliability signals. I mean, there's a chasm between the client and the server. There's a
Yeah.
vast chasm of what's going on, what's happening in the world. And a lot of that never even makes it to your infrastructure, right? Like think about
Right.
third-party impact. Think about the fact that, still holds true today. Steve's golden rule of 80% of the time being spent on the front end still holds true. And a lot of that is third party or CDN or other areas. Just
Yeah.
a big chunk of missing signal that I think SREs are tuned into now and like realizing that they actually really need in order to kind of complete that whole story around reliability. At the
Yeah.
same time, we've got our front end developers and even more business folks that are focused a lot on rum data and wanting to understand their users and their users experience that don't necessarily want to be put into a tool where they can't actually get that
Right, yeah, yeah,
information,
yeah.
right?
Or where the only answer it gives them is network performance, right? Because I think like
Exactly.
one of the things that often gets missed is like variable human behavior. Like I think, I have this, I guess it's not really a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory at all. But like most companies like don't, especially in consumer, don't have a particularly good line of sight to their end user in terms of getting performance feedback. Because like I don't know. I use a lot of websites to, order stuff on an e-commerce or something site or something. If it doesn't perform well, the likelihood I go file a support ticket or like phone their support line is basically zero, right? I'm just going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go to a competing brand because especially on kind of born on the internet, D2C brands, there's so little friction to switching to a very like similar competitor that people just aren't invested enough. Nobody's going to walk into a Macy's and tell the person at the counter that their website is like my mom made. But like broadly speaking, most people aren't going to do that, right? And so I think, we used our software engineers building our website or mobile app as essentially a proxy as to whether or not the services were fast enough. Because the web developer unhappy about how poorly it was behaving locally must be a good proxy for your end user. But like it turns out like that web developer is on a MacBook M4. They've got the latest version of Safari. They're on gigabyte internet. They're testing a very limited set of your flow and like in, stateful flows where stuff builds up in mismatched circumstances. Weird stuff happens, right? And like so there's no real substitute for what your actual users are experiencing to discover where the mix of their behavior and all of the data being emitted by your systems kind of collide. And data center, like edge of your data center isn't turned it turns out a good proxy.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was always kind of one of the things when we first started talking about RUM is thinking about the fact that, you can't always really test where your users are. You can certainly try. You can certainly expand your geography and your footprint and emulate and simulate a lot of those experiences, but there's no replacement for actually the real user. I think other areas in this space that I find interesting and I feel like are kind of culminating right now is when we think about the technology and we think about the browser support. Um, we love Google, we love the Chrome team and the Speed Metrics team. They have just done such a huge service to the performance community in terms of pushing these standards and pushing more metrics that give us more of a feel for what users are experiencing when they're seeing the site, not necessarily just a number or a metric, but hey, is this actually loading for them? Can I actually interact with it? All the things that we got from Core Web Vitals. So I think that was really good for sort of shifting a little bit more of the focus to that user space, and I think we've certainly benefited from that as a performance community. Where we're at now is that we're actually starting to finally see points where we're getting those same signals in WebKit, in Safari. So I think this is another shift that we're seeing in the landscape of like, okay, all of a sudden now we've actually got more visibility, more telemetry, really, if you will, to users that are using the most popular web browser in the world, but on a mobile device, right? We've got a lot of iPhone users that have just been a black box to this point. And now we're starting to get more key visibility into that with LCP and INP most likely shipping this year. So a lot of really interesting, fun stuff happening that, quite frankly, I think is a little bit of a black box to folks and a little bit of a gap that is in need of filling.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'm interested in your take. Like, obviously, you've done a lot of work with the RUM W3C working group,
Yep.
which obviously has helped evolve like browser standards. And there's been some historic, performance timing markers and stuff that you can do on the browser, but it's largely ignored the other part of the picture, which is like how do you actually stitch it together or measure things that happen asynchronously to create like a new personalized you can see a situation where an end user may not just want to measure LCP as load, but actually how long does it take for all the asynchronous things that wouldn't be counted as part of LCP after the initial page load to actually hydrate with your personalized view? How do you see that colliding with like, I mean, you know a little bit about what we've been doing in the OpenTelemetry space, but kind of like the OpenTelemetry investments that are being made at the CNCF level.
Well, I think it's huge, and I think I was chatting with one of our engineers this morning about OpenTelemetry and specifically about the browser SDK and the opportunities for us there to start to tie some of those things together. And yeah, I think that it's a huge opportunity. I think it's something that we've really missed when thinking about that sort of traditional flow that a user takes through a site or like the journey, or like what's the goal that they're actually after when they're going to a site trying to purchase. There's so many different moving parts. And we've always said, like, hey, no one knows your application better than you, right? No one really knows the things that you care about instrumenting, that you care about measuring more than the site owner. So while standards are awesome in terms of getting specifications in and getting stuff out of the box, I think OpenTelemetry starts to open up this whole new world of visibility that we just haven't had. And more to that, attribution. Like attribution
Mm.
has always been such a freaking issue with the browsers, right? Privacy issues, constraints, all those types of things. Like just getting to root cause has taken us so long as an industry for things like long animation frames and other things that we can now attribute to an interruption in that flow. I think this is pretty exciting stuff when we start thinking about what we can actually get, whether that's through a trace or a log or however we're ingesting that
Yeah, yeah,
data
yeah.
from the client.
Yeah, I think to that point, not just attribution, but like causality is interesting too. Like what causes a repaint, right? Was like the exception occur and cause the browser to repaint? You have an IMP problem, but like the bigger problem is that all these repaints are occurring because there's other problems with your JavaScript. And like how can we go discover those and not just tell you your browser reflected performance stats are bad, but help you actually fix the problem.
Yeah, yeah,
I do want to
absolutely.
bring up because I think it's a great question that we got submitted, which we're touching on different parts of this. The question is, it seems like there's an ongoing challenge with literacy regarding performance and RUM data. Are you seeing that from your end? Do you see opportunities to address that now with this acquisition? And I'd love to bring it forward the group to get your thoughts on it, but I feel like a lot of this is in many ways web specifically, right? Not every metric is available in every browser, so you can't even measure and monitor performance the same. But also from semantics, right? Like the language of Rum, like Andrew was touching on. I know Embrace and the hotel community has been investing heavily in mobile and web semantic conventions to even define what are the standard ways to describe some of this behavior. So I'd love to get y'all's thoughts on this.
I've got a lot
That's
of
a
thoughts
great
on that,
question.
but Mark hasn't talked much, so I'll shut up for a second.
That's a great question. I love that because, that is always a constant challenge, jumping on a call with a product team or a business owner and trying to explain what, largest contentful painters, we have so many acronyms, so many different terms, so many technologies, so many kind of, I guess, signals is if you like to think about it that way. How do we actually, wrap that up in a way that's digestible? And there are some steps that we had taken at SpeedCurve towards that. So one of them was on the slides earlier around user happiness, where we tried to boil down those signals into a metric or a way into understanding that data. And we called it user happiness and just being able to say, hey, 30% of your users are unhappy, compare them to people that are happy and try and understand what's different about those data and what the signals that are coming in. Cliff, coined we should really call them cliff charts rather than correlation charts, but, Cliff, really champions that sort of visualization where we're looking at, conversion rates and business outcomes and how they correlate to performance signals to try and, to me, I see it as a pivot from trying to understand the data to then getting into the diagnostics. And so how we move up and down those layers is something that I'm really keen to work on in terms of the user experience.
Yeah.
And I think something that we're all very kind of passionate about across both companies.
Yeah, I think you kind of like had it there's another component there, which is like as we think about how we unify the mission that a traditional performance team has been on with reliability teams, the cultural impact it can have to an organization
Mm.
and not thinking about like LCP as a marketing problem or a product manager problem, but actually an engineering problem because it has impact to users' ability to understand the site or retain eyeballs. And then therefore it is like it's a pageable offense, if you will. I once heard like this, there's no such thing as a front end emergency. And it's like, I bet you most retail brands that would have somebody misconfigure a CDN 2 days before Black Friday, where everyone's checking in to see their offer and suddenly bouncing from the site because they can't see the offer and they lose that mental attention that a consumer just paid to their brand, would see that as an emergency. Like the lost revenue opportunity is massive there versus 4 minutes of downtime, which is the difference of 100% uptime in a month versus 99.99% uptime. And we spend so many dollars in the industry around uptime. Well, actually, like there's some cultural shift that needs to happen into the things that have subtle yet material effects to user behavior.
Absolutely. Yeah, micro outages and other things that I think can have an impact that you just don't necessarily get any signal to these days, I think is absolutely. Back to
Yeah,
that point.
we're going to touch on this, and Colin's going to move us along. So, like, but we should
Okay.
definitely talk about how we're thinking about unifying this picture because that's one of the things that we've invested in so historically. But I know, Cliff, you're starting to think about from a product implication standpoint, what it means to take the historical signals you've really invested in and bring them to the eyeballs of more people in an organization.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think what it comes down to, and I think this is probably something that people might want to listen to and might want to hear, is like a lot of times when yeah, we can go to the next slide, I think. Um, or actually, I'd go back one slide really quick. A lot of times when people think about these acquisitions, like, and I'm included in this, they get a little bit nervous that, like, hey, what's going to happen? Things are going to change, all that sort of stuff. And I think what I would argue is that we endeavor to continue to support our SpeedCurve users and our Embrace users at the highest level possible. But we would be lying to you if we said things weren't going to change, because that's why we're here. Like full on, full stop, like the coming together of these two platforms and these two ways of thinking about the world. Um, it's very exciting stuff. So I think we can talk a little bit more about where we're going thematically from this next slide. But we're already starting to skate here. We're already starting to go here. A lot of, one of the questions that we got was sort of around, let's see, what was it? Actually, I don't know if you want to ask that question, Colin.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we got a question of, sorry, let me pull it up real quick. It was, hi Cliff, Jared Green here. Given your time at SOASTA, does Embrace
So stuff.
So,
SOASTA,
Soasta.
SOASTA, does Embrace slash SpeedCurve plan to integrate performance testing functionality within the platform or just integration capabilities for end-to-end metrics under various load conditions?
Yeah. So, Jarrett, thank you for that softball. Appreciate
Yeah, I was like, that's a
it. Yeah. So I guess where we're going, where we're thinking about it, obviously, we've got mobile, we've got RUM, we've got synthetics. How does that all start to come together in a more unified experience? I think what you'll start to see us do and what we're working on right now is actually starting to integrate that synthetic data into Embrace and into that platform, while continuing to support what we have over in SpeedCurve land, where we've got all the visualizations. Hopefully, you just saw that recent release of user happiness. But the synthetics opportunity, I think, is real here, especially when you start to plug it into SREs and what we're looking at in terms of the broader community that we're serving. So while we might not be going into full load testing, expanding our capabilities to look at, do we want to support more types of testing? Do we want to support functional type testing or smoke testing? Or, hey, did it pass? Did it fail? Can we simplify our integration into a CI/CD environment where we're running a lot of tests much more rapidly and much more succession, to the point where you can actually break the build and feel comfortable that you're going to get that data back in a timely fashion? So yeah, I think that absolutely integrating all of this and integrating this into a traditional like observability stack is where we're going from a synthetics perspective. I don't know if you have any more comments on that, Andrew, before I move along.
No, I mean, I think that obviously we'll talk a little bit about other investment opportunities, but there's a lot happening in the community right now, right? Like obviously,
Yeah.
we've all, I think, both companies on the data source side have been heavily invested in open source. And I know, in this, like SpeedCurve historically heavily invested in web page test. You forked it in 2020, prior to it getting pulled into proprietary engineering path, where it now very much sits. And so you've been investing there, keeping it open source. I think there's new projects that are coming about in the kind of web performance synthetic testing space that are interesting for us to think about how we start investing there. Because we now have a lot more engineering fingers and eyeballs that would love to like participate there. But I think the historic web page test stuff at this point, I think iterating it to even do the things we would think about, like it's I don't know, like maybe the stuff coming out from Cloudflare with Telescope is really interesting for us to think about how we can challenge some of the assumptions we've historically made around test runtime and everything you need to do like what you were saying and solve new problems. And I'm particularly excited about that.
It's extremely exciting. And for those that aren't aware, aren't following along, the telescope project that was announced at Perf Now this year is basically something that we're getting a gift from the community, that we're all going to start contributing much more to, similar to what we were doing with web page tests, where we'll have this time more cross-browser ability for doing these tests, as well as potentially easier to interact with and script or deploy these agents and get them out in a timely manner. I'm especially excited about this in some of our use cases when it comes back to the whole idea that we've been a little bit blind when it comes to iOS. We've been a little bit blind when it comes to WebKit. And not only are we starting to get those metrics that we care about available, but solutions like this make it a little bit easier to actually do that type of testing on those platforms and get more of that kind of cross-platform view. So absolutely. And I think it does also show we're staying committed or actually doubling down on our commitment to the community when it comes to building a bigger, better synthetic product inside of Embrace. Other things that we're working on, obviously, we've got two incredible rum products that are focused on really two very different segments of the market that Mark had sort of talked about and illustrated a little bit earlier. I'm really excited to bring these two things together. So while we're pushing forward within the hotel community standards and really kind of trudging a path there, we will be bringing along with us all this historical knowledge
Yeah.
and what we've built and what we've been relying on as we have been working through the working groups and other things to get more browser standards and browser APIs available, for us to be able to tag into. So bringing those two together and still having that data available to an observability backend is pretty huge. And I think it's a big undertaking, but it's also something that I think we're ripe for. And this is one of those situations where I think we are going to do both. Like we have to do both, right? This is absolutely not going away. RUM data is not going away. The need to see and know your core web vitals and get diagnostic detail is equally important to being able to go in, diagnose, look at errors, get more deep traces and understanding about user flows and user journeys throughout your site. Fantastic stuff that we're actually starting to work on.
Yeah, yeah, I'm also really excited about like we've invested historically a lot around how can we because we're capturing like that entire user session as like they interact with your app. Like how can we take the context clues that are presented throughout that to help you construct a better, more custom view of your users' happiness depending upon how you built your site, right? Like I can easily, obviously for, simpler sites, LCP might be just fine. You get, 99% of the time, it's a really good proxy for user engagement. We can also see single page apps. People have lots of asynchronous happening after the initial page load where like time to interactivity for Cliff is actually very custom to how they've built their site. And the opportunity to use OpenTelemetry traces to construct that and then index happiness and see the sequence of events that happened. Oh, LCP thinks it's just healthy, but all these asynchronous events that are happening are actually resulting in a lot of follow-up interactions that are quite slow. And I think the opportunity to help, web performance engineering now have a two-way conversation with all of the engineering personas building your web property or your mobile property like I really do believe we can build the world's best Scrum product. And that's not just like me having like an like delusions of grandeur or anything, but like, taking 13 years of experience in a browser runtime and combining it with people who've really been thinking about deeply about the data indexing and observability stack is kind of it's a rare coupling of experience that I don't think any other vendor in the space has.
I mean, it's the bet we're making, and it's why
Yeah.
we're here. And if we're not going to build it, then I mean, what are we doing, right? Like we got to do it. So, super excited about it. Actually, would you mind showing the next slide, Colin? I think I got them in the right order this time.
Yeah.
Uh, this is just an example of some of the stuff that we're doing right now, where we're starting to bring synthetics into the Embrace dashboard. So for the Embrace folks on the call that are familiar with the UI and the interface, this is something we're making available. Should be right at the first of the year. We're already seeing some really good fruit come from this, but being able to surface this data within context of your app, your web app, your mobile apps, even is now going to be possible. So you can see we've taken a lot of the same design that you'll be familiar with from SpeedCurve and working with Mark already and the design team at Embrace, looking at how does this actually fit into a smooth user experience that should be intuitive and quick to get to answers. So just wanted to show this is not just smoke. We're actually heads down. We have been really heads down. So kudos to that web team that's been chomping away at this, but really exciting stuff to come.
Yeah.
Nice. I wonder if we should do our takeaways because we do have one question that I would love to wrap on at the end, but maybe I'll do a quick wrap up and then we'll do that question. And if any others come in, well, we only got about 6 minutes. Let's see what we can do. So,
I mean, it's a very attentive audience, so my guess is we will see a couple more questions.
all right. Well, let's see. So, just wanted to summarize some of this wonderful discussion. So, we focused today on this concept of user-focused observability and why it's crucial for measuring reliability from the perspective of end users. So, both SpeedCurve and Embrace are, pillars, our focal points of expertise in mobile and web has always been about connecting that performance data to user impact, so that you understand when things go wrong that it's actually impacting users and the business. And you're not just looking at, latency or uptime or whatnot, and not really understanding the true impact. We obviously shared the news that I'm sure several of y'all are familiar with if you joined here, but that Embrace and SpeedCurve are combining. We are actively innovating. You just heard Cliff and Andrew talk about what I can only assume is many, many months of work to come on building the world's greatest performance monitoring solution that is unified and for both mobile and web. We wanted to just make it very, very clear. Both platforms continue to be fully supported. If you are a SpeedCurve customer, you will continue to have access to that platform. It will continue to be improved upon over time. Likewise, the Embrace platform continues to exist. It will continue to be invested in. And Cliff shared a little bit of some of the V1 work we're working on, but customers like very soon you're just going to get additional value from this acquisition without any change in the tools you use. So the example Cliff shared, being able to leverage some of the incredible insights from the SpeedCurve platform directly in Embrace is just one of the very first things we're working on of many. So with all of that said, let's answer as many questions that we have. Maybe we need to make it like lightning round or something because I see we have like 4 questions already. Oh my gosh. Let's start with this one. So how do we present something like OTel or observability to an audience that has traditionally been locked into that classic synthetic testing web page test speed curve user? Uh, who wants to take this? Maybe Mark?
That is a great question. The way I like to think about that is back on the concept that I talked about earlier of layers. So there are a whole lot of signals, and those signals come from synthetic or it comes from OTel. And I guess the job that we're taking on as a combined team now is how do we synthesize that into a mental model that allows people to understand it. And that's where we're exploring things like user flows and user journeys and, business outcomes so that we can take those signals and feed them into there. So in my mind, kind of OTel data is just another signal that comes into that shared mental model around user action and the impact that those signals might be having on the goals that a user's trying to take.
I
Nice.
I think this is actually just the question of the day. I think it's the question that I was starting to ask myself the first time that I met Andrew and I started hearing about this. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. I think that it opens up a whole new world of possibility, but it's also two areas that are sometimes hard to explain in a quick elevator pitch. So I think a lot of what we're going to continue doing is working, talking, researching, publishing our research, educating. This is nothing different than what we've been doing in terms of like
Yeah.
continuing to bring our customers, our users along with us on this journey. But this is whoever asked that question, it sounds like maybe a great meetup or conference talk. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
something that you should be running with, right?
yeah. I'll take this really quick. Everyone who knows me knows that I like to use a good metaphor for things. So I'll think about it this way. Browser instrumentation has historically been like a bystander looking at the car going down the street and trying to tell you what it looks like, how fast it's traveling, etc. OpenTelemetry is hooking into a lot of the telemetry being emitted by the vehicle itself so that you can do a lot deeper diagnostics for each individual car that's on the road. And I think the opportunity to marry those so that you can both see what the outside world looks like in objective measurements with the data being emitted by your app give engineering teams a ton of power to build more high performing apps. And so I can't say that we have all the answers, that we have it like we're just going to go tomorrow and propose that what it looks like, but I like having folks who are both intimately participating in what it looks like to work with the browser vendors, whether today it's what comes from Apple or Chrome, whether it's tomorrow as part of an AI toolkit, and the instrumentation that is like you can put it in your app and instrument yourself and generate your own telemetry to marry that performance picture. It holds the promise of being exceptionally powerful.
Nice. Let's close because we're about at time. Maybe we can do one quick answer because we had a question come in that I think would be helpful to answer. It said, will existing speed curve users be expected to hop over to Embrace, or will things stay separate for the time being?
Yeah, we'll reiterate that point again. Things are staying separate, but we encourage you to use both, right? Like, so I think there's absolutely opportunities that we're going to be creating in Embrace, and we'll continue to create in SpeedCurve. But we're not forcing anybody's hand here. We're not taking away access to SpeedCurve and shoehorning you into something that wasn't what you had envisioned or purchased. So. Stay tuned on what it means for the future and how we continue to maintain that platform. But yeah, absolutely, you'll still have access to both.
Awesome. And with that said, I'd love to just do a really quick wrap up. So if you'd like to learn more about either of our products, you can visit our websites, embrace.io or speedcurve.com. And with all that said, I want to give a big thanks. So thank you for being here in attendance today. Thank you for being so active. We loved having all of your questions. And also, I wanted to give a big thank you to this awesome group, Mark, Andrew, and Cliff. Thank you all so much for being here, having this awesome discussion about the future of user-focused observability.
Absolutely. Thanks
Thanks a
for
lot.
hosting,
Thanks,
Colin.
everybody. Talk
Yeah,
soon.
Thanks all.
thanks. Have a great day.